Okay, let's continue on the next process, forging. Okay, in forging, we will look into introduction, okay, classification of forging operation, general characteristic, and then these three type of forging: open die, impression die, and closed forging. And then we look at the defect and also the design consideration. So we can see that these are the forging process. It is one of the traditional uh, process, okay. And forging is a basic process in which the workpiece is shaped by compressive force applied through various die and tooling. The deformation process in which is compressed between two die. Okay. Application for forging is in the engine, crankshaft, okay, connecting rods, gear, aircraft structure component, and also turbine. And it can be done at room temperature or cold forging, or at the elevated temperature, in which warm or hot forging. Okay. And then in the forging process, you need additional finishing operations such as heat treating, okay, and also some machining for the final surface finish. And classification of forging, we can classify as the hot, okay, or warm forging, in which you need to heat up. And usually for deformation, that need a lots of change, okay. So it need to be warm or hot to elevate the temperature to reduce the strength and increase the ductility, so easy to deform. And cold forging, in which increase strength that result from the strain hardening. And also we can look at the impact and press forging. Impact usually using the impact load from the hammer, or using the press, okay, gradually pressure, okay, by the die. And we can classify into a few process, but we're going to focus on open die. Okay, these are the advantage and disadvantage, and then also closed die. Okay, and then another one is the precision die, or known as the fleshless die. And these are the three type forging that we're going to focus on. The first one is the open die. Work is compressed between two flat dies. Okay, this is the diagram. And the other one is the impression die forging, okay, in which they have the die shape, okay, or the cavity, so that the workpiece will be compressed and the metal is flow into the cavity and the flash is created. And the other one is a flashless forging. Work is completely constrained in the die. There's no flash occur and it's completely contained in the die. Open die forging is the most simple forging process, in which they use the compression force, okay, between two flat dies. And it usually to reduce the height and increase the diameter. And commonly used name is upsetting or upset forging. So these are two flat die and the force is from the top, okay, and used to flatten process. And open die forging have with no friction, okay. And then the other one is with friction, in which we can see that when they have friction, okay, they resulting in the barreling effect. So this one is for the no friction, okay, and this one with the friction. Let's watch the video on the hammer forging. Okay, this is the hot forging. We need to heat up the workpiece. Okay, so the compressive force is applied. To get the shape that they want. Okay, so a few forging steps must be done to complete the shape. So it's very hot, so you need to be very careful on working with this forging. Okay, so this is called the progressive forging, in which it's done by stages. Alright, let's look on the impression die forging. Usually it takes place in the die cavity, in which being forged between two shaped dies, and usually it perform at the elevated temperature, in which to enhance the ductility, okay, and use lower force. So these are the example. So these are the die, okay, and when the force is applied, so the workpiece here, it's follow the die cavity, and the extra will go to the side, in which they call it as flash. Compression of work part by dies will inverse of desired part shape. Okay, flash is formed, and several forming steps sometimes required. Okay, so they have to move to another die to get the final shape. Okay, then later flash must be trimmed after the cooling process. Okay, let's watch the video on the impression die forging.
Strokes of different force are used with dies having several impressions for sequential preforming and finish forging operations. Preforming operations may include edging to increase the workpiece cross-section, blocking to refine the shape for finish forging, and finish forging.
Okay, we can see that they have a few steps of the forging process. Advantages for impression die is that it's used for the higher production, okay, because the process is very fast, and then produce less waste, in which compared to machining, and have greater strength, and also have a very favorable grain orientation. And the limitation is not capable of close tolerance, and machining process always required for the finishing product. Okay, for the closed die or the flashless forging, or known as a precision forging process, there's no flash. Okay, so it contained in the die. And process control more demanding, because you need to set that the workpiece won't result in the defect. Okay, usually for simple and asymmetric. The forging defect that we usually found is that surface cracking, and then we have also internal defect, okay, on the inside part, in which non-uniform deformation, and also temperature gradient during forging, and also microstructure changes. And these are the example lapse form, okay, especially buckling. So when the process, they have this wet buckling, okay, especially when you have a thin part, or you have lapse, okay, in finish forging. And for the internal defect, okay, sometimes it's occur crack develop in the ribs, okay, especially when you have a very thin part here. And the design consideration, in which forging have lots of parameter, in which it start from the design itself, okay, and then also on the type of material, okay. Okay, so open die is usually for small quantity, and for closed die, since it's high production, so it can be used for the large quantity. Alright, so that's all for forging.